Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third week of the Inspire series where Sarah, Karen, and Michelle, who is usually with us, who isn't with us tonight, are talking about different topics to do with picture books. But tonight we have a special guest from Finland, and that's Pirjo, who is a global influencer in education. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you all.
And it's good to finally see you. Pirjo, for those people who don't know you, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself in a nutshell?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. I am Pirjo Suhonen, and I'm a teacher myself, mainly a preschool teacher, but I used to work in Brussels also in a European school where I started in preschool, ended up in primary and then secondary school. So that was really good because then I could get to see all the learning journey. And Brussels was actually the birthplace of what I'm doing currently, which is ELO Finland digital teacher training courses on Finnish education, because I was actually working in the UK section, and every single teacher there and some of the parents also, they kept asking me that what is the secret sauce behind Finnish education. And I was just like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of born with it. I don't know what makes it unique or special or what works. So then I started to dig in deeper, and I even took some teachers to visit the schools. And it was one of them who worked in secondary then in the European school. Now he's principal in a very innovative school back in Ireland. He said that it's really quite expensive to fly to Finland. It's difficult to find schools because some of the schools have closed the doors already because they wouldn't be doing anything else but showed the schools after first PISA results. And then he said that why there isn't an online opportunity for this. Obviously, it's not quite the same, but you still get an idea. So this is why I came up with the idea to create courses on Finnish education. Sorry, maybe it wasn't so short, but
No, that's good. That's good. It gives us a really good understanding, and because in some ways education systems are the same across the globe, but in other ways they are vastly different. And the training of teachers is very different from country to country, and even just in Australia from state to state. The training is so different. So it's good to know that you're out there, you're on the ball, and you're doing that.
Thank you.
And helping everyone.
Yeah, and spot on. I mean, but I still think that there's so much stuff we can learn from each other. And every time I do teacher training, I learn from the people in Georgia or India, or it's a win-win. And I often hear the argument that Finnish education, it doesn't work elsewhere, which is complete nonsense. Finnish education isn't purely Finnish anyway. I mean, we have a lot of our educational philosophy comes from John Dewey, who is from US.
Yeah.
And there are so many things that we can learn and benchmark from. So yeah, I love global education anyway.
Yeah, and we're all learners, aren't we?
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay, let's dive into this week's question, or two questions. How do picture books help develop children's literacy and language skills? And how do they help develop their understanding of text in the social sphere? So two really, I guess we could probably talk all night on these, but we don't have the time. Two really important questions. If we can just deal with the first one, how do picture books help literacy and language skills? Sarah, would you like to go first on that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Pirjo probably know quite a lot about this. I've also worked in education for about 16 years as a preschool teacher here in the UK, and then in France up to sort of 16-year-olds. So I've kind of seen again about the whole global education and how we kind of take from each other. However, when it comes to books, especially with obviously the preschool range that we're all quite used to working with, yeah, it's picture books are hugely important, and we look at what's called the symbolic development. So for children, especially of the younger age range, written text and speech is more abstract for them to understand kind of the meaning of and to take some meaning from it. So quite often we start with preschool children with pictures, because they're more of a concrete object for them to gain some meaning from. So it's all about the child reader, and I said this I think in the first episode, it's about growing them as a reader and their confidence, and it's not just about the book. They're taking meaning from it, and that helps them to understand where they are in the world, in society, which we'll go into later. So it's definitely about symbolic development. And when we think of symbols, we think of images and pictures. And that's why, especially with that younger age range, with the very, very early readers, the preschoolers, the kindergartens, we are looking to use picture books as a tool to start in their journey of helping them with their literacy and language through books.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. Pirjo, would you like to pick up on your
yes,
thoughts?
I mean, Sarah had a pretty full-on answer, so it's difficult to add anything to it, but to agree. And I was just thinking about, I also was teaching language to learners, and then I mean, pictures are you know how valid they are. It's so much easier to show in a picture that this is what I mean, whether it's just one word or one action. But I mean, I love reading to kids, and most of the time, most of the children love it too. And I think, especially in preschool, I think that's when you create the foundation for reading. That really that you don't just read to learn, but for the pleasure of reading. And language development, I mean, you can have so much richness to your language through reading books. So that's what came to my mind when I was listening to Sarah.
Yeah, that's true. And Karen, you've worked a lot in with Indigenous communities.
Yeah, an Indigenous-based school, a primary school, 26% Aboriginal for over 20 years. But just going back to the topic of literacy and language skills that picture books do develop, there's been a lot of talk here in Australia at the moment. It's very topical because there's a huge gap when children start school. And it's to do with if they've been to preschool or not, and if their parents have read to them. Children who are read picture books to before they start this kindergarten here or prep, children who are read to every night compared to children who are not, have a vocab of, and they're ahead in understanding hundreds of thousands of words by the time they start school. And there's this huge gap. So now they're talking at the moment to make preschool compulsory for all children so that all children are read to. And you don't realise it, but when you start reading to a child, they're learning how a word sounds, how a word works, what concept it works in, what social setting, how it relates to their world, or is it another world that they don't know about? And they're always child-centred and child-friendly, so the child's immersed. And it also brings in an emotional bond And when a parent and a child are emotionally bonded, or a teacher's emotionally bonded with their class, they often will talk about books, and that's more learning because you're talking about the book as well as reading the book. And, you know, I was watching my nephew's little boy, he's 1, and he's got the hungry caterpillar, and he knows all about he knows what day, and he's 1, he can say the day, and he knows what the caterpillar is. And I'm hungry like the caterpillar, and they relate it to their world, and he wouldn't know anything about that if he hadn't been read to. So their world broadens immensely, and you're really doing a child a disservice if you don't read to them. You really are. It's the best thing you can do.
Karen, can I just touch on, like you were saying about making preschool compulsory, because it isn't at the moment.
Compulsory, not, I mean, maybe free or something, so all children have access. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because you know how you just see it, but you don't. Like there was a whole article on it, and I just skim read it, and I wish I'd kept it.
Yeah.
But it's very topical, and in Australia we do.
I was just wondering what age group you were.
I was preschool age, but when you test children when they start kindergarten here, they do a best start, and language. Speech and reading also correlate. If a child speaks well, they usually learn to read well because they can pick things up and they can hear. But reading the books develops that too.
Yeah.
Because they learn how to say those words, and they're hearing words they may never hear in their everyday world. And they're only going to hear that in a picture book. Like marvellous or magnificent. And mum's, you know, or Noni the pony or whatever it is, they're they're hearing rhyme and pattern and rhythm, and then they can play with it.
Yeah, that's very true. Pirjo, working across the globe, do you see that in other countries?
Interesting.
Yeah, like that. The sooner they start school, the sooner their children are exposed to literacy through picture books or whatever. You know, it's that correlation between their learning and how well they learn, and you know that rebounds to how they see themselves in the world. Like, do you see that? Does that work differently in other countries that you're aware of, or I'm just curious?
Well, what I could say is that Finnish preschool system, it's considered really child-friendly and playful learning, and we want to create the foundations for learning in preschool. But it's like for instance, in UK, the formal education starts way earlier than in Finland. I was going to ask from Karen that what age is the preschool in Australia, because in Finland it's 6 years old, and that is compulsory, and they go to school when they're 7. But to go back to Jennifer's question, was if I see differences is that sometimes I feel that teachers are educated that you only need to prep for tests and phonics, and if the education system is created so that you teachers and the kids sort of get penalized if you don't get good test results, then you start to skip everything else that is maybe even more valuable than the test results. And then you start to maybe doing phonics way too early and start reading and writing exercises when the kids aren't really motivated and ready for it. And I often say that, well, just read to them, because that will actually, like Karen was saying, that they start to hear the sounds and they start to blend the sounds, but it's in a fun way, isn't it? And then you learn everything else to go with it. Social, emotional learning. If you have read books about bullying and anti-bullying, and and everything else. I mean, you learn empathy because kids are highly imaginative anyways. They can take roles in a safe environment in stories. It's storytelling, and kids learn from it so much more. I mean, I quite often try to choose the books that when there's a topic in the preschool class, there's a shy girl, for instance, that then I try to find a story where how the shy girl becomes brave and starts to speak, and you can see how that girl goes like, oh, that's a bit like me, isn't it? And so there are so many other things. I don't know if I exactly answered your question, but there was one more thing I wanted to say about New Zealand. There was research done that those kids who were being taught earlier how to read and write, and then those who were started later, those who started later, they caught them up when they were 9 or 10 years old, and then they went further than the ones who started reading and writing when they were, I can't exactly remember, but let's say 4 or 5. And those who waited and they actually played with stories and enjoyed and loved stories, they went further. And I think the theory goes because their vocabulary was a lot bigger, and then that will help you in reading comprehension, which is the target of reading, isn't it?
Yeah,
Not just
yeah.
mechanical reading.
Exactly, yeah. And that's really interesting. Here in Australia, children start compulsory schooling at 4 or 5. And it's where, yeah, you guys are later in Finland. What age are you in the UK, Sarah?
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of pick up on a couple of those points. So we here it's very similar to you. So we start when I'm talking about preschool, it's 2.5 to 4 years, and then compulsory school is 4 years. But I have to say our preschools are also very structured, and they work under a very specific early years framework, a guideline. So although they're at preschool 2.5 to 4, we are actually having to work under this early years framework. So there is a lot on literacy already. And I absolutely agree with Pirjo, because I'm quite lucky. You know, I've taught in the UK, I've taught in France. I've got a lot of family in Denmark, and I get there quite a lot as well. And I have to say that alongside our preschools, we're having a lot of forestry schools now, which are opening up, and they are looking towards the Nordic countries. They're going out to Denmark, they're going out to Finland, they're going out to Sweden to learn that module. Because when I place my daughters against some of my nieces, and they're all the same age, and mine have started preschool at 2.5, and they've been tested on their literacy and language skills and their reading, and they've started, you know, proper school at 4, as opposed to my nieces in Denmark who have started at 6, 7, but have had the building blocks of like we say, playing with stories and being outside in the forest and bringing kind of stories in from there and learning in a different way, building up their confidence in who they are. They've all caught up with each other, and they're all, you know, there's no difference. So I'm very pulled because I can see these 2 different modules that work very differently, but kind of get them to this, you know, the same place. However, stories have definitely come into both areas, whether it's through that standardized framework of learning, as opposed to when we're looking towards the Nordics, and that the children are having a freer experience with stories and pictures and you know, abstract concepts for them to build on. So it's really interesting, because here in the UK it is very framework orientated, it's really guided, and I don't know if I think that works sometimes, because I have seen the other side. You know, as a children's author as well, we understand that, you know, there's an increased engagement with when you're with a child and you're reading stories and you're demonstrative, and you know, you're letting them immerse themselves into a story world and use their imagination, and I think that is so rich.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
absolutely.
And I also, sorry, can I just say something that it's I would find it hard to teach like that also. That I always say that there isn't an ABC manual for teachers, because there are so many kids in your classroom anyway. So I think the beauty of teaching is because you can be creative and you have that autonomy to teach. Because I mean, if you've been teaching for 5 or more years, or even just a couple of years, every single class is different, isn't it? The kids are different every single year, so different methods you need to use them. And funny thing actually came to my mind when you mentioned that it's quite a rigid framework in UK. That when I was supply teaching in European school, of course I had to get the lesson plans from other teachers, and there was a really lovely teacher whose class I quite often took, and she introduced me to Ken Robinson and etc. But she always said, when I had a quick look at it, that what she had planned, and she just said it to me when she handed over, and she just said it that make it yours. That's what you do anyways. And I was like,
Yeah.
oops, I've been caught.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to catch every child, don't we? We have, you know, like say, there's that child at the back, there's that quiet child, you know, there's the child that's come from somewhere else, and English for us would be their second language. You know, there's so many things that I think as teachers we recognize the more that we're in the classroom, and we're building these connections with these children. And I just think that picture books are such an amazing way to be able to connect with all children, and that's why it's so incredibly important that we are having more and more books come through which are inclusive and diverse, and are allowing every child to recognize themselves in those pictures, and then eventually the text, you know, they are hearing the words, they're understanding the words as well. So I think, yeah, picture books are definitely that sort of integral tool that is used no matter how we're teaching or where we're teaching in the world.
Yeah, and I was I'm glad you brought that up, because you know, a question in my mind is, you know, yes, there are more and more books coming out now on diversity and inclusion and all those things, but not so much, and I can only speak for Australia, like my experience, they're still really difficult to find in Australian classrooms. They're there, but not all children can identify with them, and that's where the teacher has to get really creative. And I don't know if you find the same, Karen, when you were teaching. And I'm really happy that more and more books are getting out there. I just wondered, what is it the same in Finland and in the UK? Or are your books, picture books, more diversified in your schools? So
I would
go first, Karen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You go.
Yeah, you can
No, go for it.
I was just going to say that, yes, I mean, I think we're making a conscious decision to bring them into the classroom. I mean, especially at preschool, we are specifically, as teachers and as parents, you know, and as, you know, social beings on this planet, we are making that decision to bring them in. But interestingly, I was just saying to Jen just before that it's World Book Day here today in the UK, and although today our teachers are striking, absolutely fine, we are all schools are going to have World Book Day tomorrow, and children can come dressed up as their, you know, their favourite character. I can absolutely guarantee you they will be, you know, the classics, that, you know, they will still come in as characters from these classic books because they are still there. So I think, as Pirjo said before, it's for the teacher to make it what it is and to bring them in, but we are definitely talking about it more. Definitely we're talking about diversity and inclusivity within books, and outside of schools they're definitely in the stores, they are at the forefront, which hopefully is starting the conversations back into the classroom.
In Australia, the focus is now on diversity, and inclusion, and it's part of the school curriculum. It's compulsory, and the books are there. The thing is, the teachers need to be aware of the books, and a lot of the time the books are out, and if their library doesn't have them and they're too busy working to go and source it, they're not using it. But a lot of teachers are really proactive and are searching for books, especially here in Australia too, for an Indigenous voice. That's very huge now. An acknowledgement of country in school and all sorts of, and the Aboriginal culture, and they're bringing in all nationalities into our curriculum. I think there's still a little bit of that program, when teachers program and they're using their picture books, they might still use their old true and trusted books. And I think you need to freshen it up with new books as well. And then that brings in new voices and new diversity. But also a lot of the time too, children bring books into school now and share their books. I had that a lot. They could bring in for news their favourite book, and then we could share it. So there are ways you can change it up as well. And if you've got, the sad thing in Australia is a lot of schools with budget cutting is, if they don't have a librarian, there's a huge difference in schools that have a librarian and ones that don't, and someone else who's a teacher just runs it on the side. But schools with a librarian flourish a lot. And book parade, you are seeing diversity in what children dress as in the book parade. It's not just the traditional things now. We have we call it hat parade, book parade. Used to be the Easter hat parade, but it's changed now. It's sort of just the hat parade. But even 6 years ago, when I would have been at my last one, the kids are changing how they dress. And even when you look at authors who've written diverse books, they'll be sent images from children who've done the parade dressed as their character. So children are doing it, and they are aware, and it is out there, and it is growing. And once it grows more, it snowballs.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm always full of hope and I'm always full of belief. But here in Australia, we're very much the same as the UK. We do follow a framework and a curriculum, and it's quite structured. And a stickler point for me here is when kids start school here in Australia, they can be, when you go to kindergarten, you can be 4, 5 or 6. And so when I started, I was 4, and I had people 2 years older than me in my class. A couple, most weren't a year older. And when that happens, what Pirjo was saying, I could always read. I was good at that. But your attention span and your concept development is not the same as somebody who's older. You haven't had that exposure. And they've also had more time to be read to and all sorts of experiences that you haven't had when you're younger. Yeah, and a lot of children start preschool here at 2. Son started on his 2nd birthday because I had to go to work. This is how it is. And it's a bit sad, but even preschools are structured with their day, but they always have story time. So it's what books are they bringing in, because they know the value of the language and the social development, and even helps you teach skills. You know, sit, look, listen, learn. How do we listen when we're going to Storyland? What do? We don't talk, we zip our lips, we open our ears. We're going into that world now. You know, you're teaching them to concentrate, hone in. That's a skill in itself before you even open the book. And then even before you start the book, you can go, what do you think this book's about? Look at the cover. What are we going to see today? And you're already talking and engaging. And it sticks with you for life, because there's a car ad on TV at the moment. And every time I hear it, I smile, because it's like we're going on a bear hunt and they're in the car. And there's a picture book right there. Get everybody from child to adult, because it stays with you forever. Those sort of books never leave you. Never.
Yeah. Pirjo,
true.
you're sitting there going, you're like agreeing a lot with what Karen's saying. Have you got anything to
Yeah.
add to that?
Yes, I mean, and I scribbled down a few words so that I remember what I was thinking while I was listening to Karen, that kids in Finland also, I mean, it used to be that about 3 years old would go to kindergarten, but now it's younger because it's the life of any mother. I mean, you need to earn to feed your family. And but what Karen was also saying about concentration skills, and I scribbled down flow and focus, because what's more important school skill than that you grow your attention span. And what a lovely way to learn to be attentive is listening to stories. And I actually love it. I quite often say to kids that, hey, I say it, I try to model it myself, that I love reading books. I actually do. And I hope it shows. And I think it helps kids to love it, that they are being read to, because I enjoy it. I'm not pretending. And I often say it to them that I can tell when you're really getting into the story. I can see it from your faces when you travel to that storyland. And any teacher can agree with me, because you can see it when they completely elsewhere. They living the story. And I quite often do it so that I read first, because I want them to imagine the story, and then I show the pictures after, so that it's not offered to them on a silver plate. I think that also increases their creativity. It's a bit like even adults, when you read a book and then you see a movie done out of it, and a lot of time people say that, oh, it was a slight disappointment. Why? Because your own imagination is always better than someone else's view on the book. So I based that on a similar idea. And I love Michael Rosen. I mean, he's amazing. And I mean, I think he's trying to do that, to really change the idea that yes, phonics is important and it works, but don't kill the joy of reading and literacy. Indeed, that and motivate. And I think pictures motivate also children to listen to books. And what Karen was saying about librarians, they definitely help. I mean, teachers are busy wherever you go. You don't have million years time to find out what books have been published. They published all the time, which is great. But you want to go to library where it's there. I mean, normally, I mean, we have Kalevala in Finland, which is like our cultural heritage. The librarians have done it. They have found the books for you according to what's happening, Independence Day or Christmas. They there, so you just have to go and take them. And what we used to do in with quite many preschools do it, that they have a weekly or a couple of times a month visit to a library, and kids get to choose the books themselves, because then that will increase the motivational level. Sometimes you have to help them a little bit so that they don't just take whatever, or you can just ask that, are you sure about this? So, but and it's quite interesting also, because then you see that, okay, this girl is interested in dinosaurs. This is more like a factual book rather than a story, but by all means, let's take it, or biology, or whatever it is. And quite often modern schools are built with the library, because money is tight wherever you go. So they try to create community buildings nowadays rather than just a school. So then you have a library there, who not just for the school, but anyone living in the nearby area, which I quite like also, because it's sort of opens the door to the school also. And also then you can use the school for concerts or whatever other reason. And talking about libraries, library system is one of the reasons we have a very effective library system in Finland. And there is a really innovative one in Helsinki. If you ever visit Finland, you must visit that. It's called Audi. It has won a lot of rewards because, of course, books are slightly changing into ebooks also. So you need to renew the libraries also. I still love books. By the way.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You have to have that physical book.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Also, we have free libraries in our communities for the community, and our library is a regional library. We're a small city, and they host story time for preschoolers, and it's free. And then they do little songs and dances and all sorts of things. And there's very few places that young parents can go where they can have something that's beautiful and free for their children. And our libraries do that. It's story time. And in the classroom, I would always have a little class library, and it would be some of the books I would buy and some from the library, and then you just change them over, and we would have quiet reading time, even for kindergarten. It doesn't matter what age. And they would get their book, and I'd set the timer, and they could go and change the book whenever they wanted, and they had free choice within the classroom. But when a young child engages with a book and a character, they don't believe that the character is fictional. To them, the character's real. So they think, like, if I'm talking about the very hungry caterpillar, they think that caterpillar's real. Or like Banjo and Ruby, they're real to that child. They're not something made up. And you'll find them go away, and if they have free playtime, they're pretending to be the dog in the story, or they're pretending to be a rabbit, or the mum, or the baby, or the parent, or the dad, or whatever it is. And they take it with them, and it comes out in their imagination and their play. And if you don't read to them, that they're not doing that. They're only mimicking what they might see on a screen. And the other thing that is available too through our libraries that's really good is Storybox. And I think it helped a lot during COVID, and parents can log in. I haven't used it because I'm way past little ones, but they can access stories for free. So they're still picture books, but they're in digital form. And so at least it's leveling things up so that children who are disadvantaged are getting access. And you do still find city children or people who are in more affluent areas have more benefits than the children who are out remote areas. They're significantly disadvantaged. If you can imagine an Australian child doing School of the Air, if you didn't have the technology, their world would be small. But at least now they've got access to books and things too, to try and level things up, because the study did show children in remote areas or whatever are significantly disadvantaged to their city or more bigger regional areas, because they just don't have those opportunities. And it is the books. It is the picture books. The most beautiful thing in the whole world, picture books.
Yeah, we're all lovers of picture books, and I think this conversation has been really, really informative, and I think it's really confirmed the value of picture books, and in so many different ways, you know, from the language learning through to kids finding their place socially, finding who they are, their identity. So it's been a fantastic conversation. So thank you, ladies, for all your input. It's been really great. Is there any last final words?
Read to your kids every day.
Let kids play.
Let kids play, yes. Say.
Absolutely, yeah. Picture books, just have them there. Let the child take the lead. Let them guide you as well into their minds and imaginations, and make of it what they will. And then just watch them grow from it.
Yeah.
Watch any adult when you ask them about their favourite picture book and you watch them light up, if they've been read to, you watch they're just back there in that place, no matter how old they are. It's the most happy place in the world.
That is true. Yeah. Only sky is the limit, and I think the creativity is the key in today's world. I mean, we also competing against AI, so let's give kids a lot of creativity, and they can be brave little soldiers after that.
Yeah. AI is a different ball game again, which we won't get into tonight.
Indeed.
Yeah, it will be interesting
Until
to see
next
where that
time.
goes. But yeah, all right. Thank you, ladies, for a fantastic discussion, and we'll chat again soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Lovely. Thank you.